Welcome, my dear friends, my kindred spirits who love literature, film, and the interplay of art and storytelling. I'm truly delighted to have you here with me, gathered in this space where ideas can stretch their wings and soar. Tonight, or today depending on where you are in the world, we're venturing into the depths of cinematic waters to explore Meg 2, The Trench 2023. Before we set out, I'd like to extend a gentle invitation. If you enjoy thoughtful, reflective conversations about film, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Not because numbers matter more than the words we share, but because your support allows these discussions to continue, to grow, to flourish into the kind of dialogue I know we all long for, dialogue that treats movies not as disposable entertainment, but as texts worthy of deep, careful reading. And let me say this very clearly, right from the start. This is not a conventional movie review. What follows is not a checklist of good or bad performances, nor a verdict on whether you should watch it on a big screen or wait for streaming. No, what we are doing here is something richer, something closer to the way we might read a novel together in a seminar, parsing imagery, interrogating themes, wondering how fictional moments can shed light on the very real, very complicated world we inhabit. This is intellectual play as much as it is critical thought, a journey into symbols, metaphors, and resonance. I often find myself smiling when I think about why a film like this touches me. On the surface, it is bold spectacle, a high-octane adventure where the stakes are nothing less than survival itself. Yet beneath that, there is a quiet hum of something more, a whisper about humanity's smallness in the face of nature, about our arrogance when confronting the unknown, about the strange beauty of danger itself. For me, watching this film wasn't merely about giant sharks or daring rescues. It was about remembering those moments in my own life when I felt swallowed up by something bigger than me, when the world seemed vast and unmanageable, and I had to find my courage, however fragile it felt. Those moments didn't involve deep-sea monsters, of course, but the metaphor still resonates. We are all, at some point, tiny figures standing before the abyss, wondering if we dare to take the next step. The introduction to this cinematic journey is fascinating because it immediately sets a tone of both familiarity and expansion. We are reintroduced to characters we've met before, people with histories, scars, and memories that linger in our minds from earlier narratives. There is something comforting about seeing them again, yet also unsettling, because we know that their return means they will be tested in new ways, faced with threats beyond anything they previously encountered. The sense of scale is immediately emphasized, not just in terms of size, the sheer enormity of the creatures that lurk beneath, but in terms of scope. What lies ahead feels bigger, darker, and more mysterious, as though the surface of the story has barely been scratched, and now we are plunging into the unknown layers beneath. As the story unfolds, it offers us that essential gift of suspense, moments of silence before the storm, where the camera lingers on a still ocean, or where characters exchange nervous glances, unsure of what waits beyond the darkness. I think one of the reasons these moments work so well is because they mirror the way our own anxieties operate. Fear is rarely a sudden eruption. More often, it is an accumulation of silences, a gathering weight that presses on us until we can no longer ignore it. Watching these sequences, I felt a kind of sympathetic tension, a reminder of times in my life when I too waited for the unknown to reveal itself, both dreading and needing to see what would come. The plot itself, as it begins to crystallize, carries us deeper and deeper, quite literally, into the trench. The idea of descending into darkness, of leaving behind the relative safety of the surface, and venturing into uncharted waters, is not just a narrative device. It is a metaphor that resonates across literature and philosophy. Dante's descent into hell, Orpheus into the underworld, even modern tales of explorers and scientists venturing beyond what is safe or known. Each of these stories asks the same essential question. What happens when humanity dares to trespass into realms it was never meant to enter? This film takes that question and renders it in images of pressure, shadow, and monstrous scale. One of the most exhilarating sequences early on involves the discovery of what lies beneath layers of thermal barriers in the ocean. The scientific curiosity that drives the characters into these depths feels both admirable and tragic. Admirable because who among us doesn't feel the tug of curiosity, the desire to see more, know more, understand more? Tragic because that curiosity so often places us in danger because we rarely consider the cost of knowledge until it is too late. I couldn't help but think of humanity's relationship with the environment, our endless probing, drilling, extracting. Always curious, always pushing, never quite prepared for the consequences. The trench becomes a mirror, reflecting not only the monsters within but the flaws in our own relentless drive to uncover and exploit. The creatures themselves, when they finally appear, are rendered with breathtaking spectacle. Their scale, their ferocity, their primal presence on the screen commands attention. But I found myself less interested in the specifics of their biology and more in what they symbolized. They are, to me, the embodiment of the unknown, the reminder that there are forces in this world, and beyond it, that will never bend to our will, that will never fit neatly into our systems of classification or control. They are a rebuke to our arrogance, a reminder that the world is not ours to tame, no matter how advanced our technology becomes. Watching them, I felt the echo of old myths. Leviathans and sea serpents, dragons that dwell in caverns, creatures that emerge from the depths to remind us of our place. The human story threaded through all of this is one of resilience and courage, of bonds tested under extreme pressure. Families, friendships, and alliances become the heart of the narrative, grounding the spectacle in something relatable. I was moved by how moments of humor, tenderness, or even quiet frustration between characters made the larger-than-life action feel human. After all, what good are giant monsters if we don't care about the people confronting them? The film seems to know this and offers us just enough intimacy to keep us tethered. I found myself reflecting on my own circle of loved ones, those people I would cling to if the waters ever rose around me, and how crises, whether literal or metaphorical, reveal the truth of who we are. As the story builds, so too does the tension. We begin to sense that not all dangers are external. Human greed, corruption, and betrayal bubble to the surface, reminding us that the monsters we fear are not always creatures of the deep. This duality, external threat and internal flaw, creates a rich texture for analysis. It echoes the structure of classical tragedies, where the hero is undone, not just by the forces outside their control, but by the flaws within themselves or their society. The narrative is generous in this way, giving us plenty to reflect upon as we consider how humanity itself often amplifies its own perils. The action crescendos in ways both expected and surprising. There are scenes of pure adrenaline, where survival is the only thought and everything else falls away. Yet interwoven into those moments are quiet beats of revelation, where characters must confront not only the physical monsters, but the existential implications of their journey. I love the way the film allowed these two strands, action and philosophy, to weave together. It reminded me that even in the most spectacular, effects-driven cinema, there is room for thought, for pause, for questions that linger long after the credits roll. And without spoiling too much, I'll say that the narrative is generous with its twists. Just when you think you've grasped the scale of the threat, something shifts, deepens, expands. The story doesn't rest on a single revelation but keeps unearthing new layers, reminding us that the unknown is never exhausted. I remember feeling a mix of delight and dread as each new twist unfolded, like a reader turning the page of a novel and discovering that the story is far more intricate than initially believed. Those moments of surprise, of narrative expansion, are the ones I cherish most in cinema, because they remind me of the inexhaustibility of storytelling itself. By the end, we are left not simply with resolution, but with echoes of what we've seen, what we've felt, what we've learned about ourselves through this descent into darkness. The closing images stayed with me, not because they tied everything up neatly, but because they left space for reflection. That, to me, is the mark of a story worth revisiting. One that lingers, that resists closure, that continues to swim in the back of your mind long after the lights have come back on. So here, my friends, is the invitation. To treat this film not as a guilty pleasure or disposable summer spectacle, but as a text worthy of study. Beneath the surface of action and spectacle, there are metaphors to unravel, themes to trace, symbols to interpret. It is a story about scale, about humanity's relationship with the unknown, about the arrogance of control, and the humility of survival. It is, in its own way, a myth retold for our time, a fable about what happens when we venture too far and awaken what lies beneath. And that is why it resonates with me so deeply. Because like all myths, it is not really about sharks or trenches or even survival. It is about us, our fears, our desires, our resilience, our capacity to confront the abyss and return changed. Watching it, I was reminded of my own brushes with the unknown, my own moments of descent into metaphorical trenches, and the way those experiences left me humbled, but also stronger. As we close this reflection, I want to thank you for sharing this journey with me. It is not easy to look at spectacle and insist that it carries meaning. It is not always fashionable to read deeply into popular cinema. Yet that is precisely why it matters, because stories are everywhere, because meaning waits even in places we might not expect. And if you found this exploration enriching, if it stirred thoughts or questions of your own, I invite you once again to like and subscribe, to join this community of thinkers and dreamers who refuse to take stories at face value. Together, we can continue to dive deep, to explore, to return with insights that illuminate both film and life. The story opens with a tension that is almost tactile, a feeling that seems to vibrate in the air as soon as we enter the world of this film. We find ourselves in the bustling corridors of the underwater research facility, a place that feels both familiar and alien, a crossroads of human ambition and the raw, indifferent power of the ocean. There is a subtle hum here, a reminder that we are on the edge of discovery, and with discovery comes danger, though the characters themselves don't yet fully realize how extreme that danger will become. The narrative begins to pull us into the rhythms of everyday life beneath the waves, with scientists and divers navigating both the technical challenges of their environment and the interpersonal dynamics that arise when people are confined in such extreme spaces. There is a naturalistic attention to detail, the way they prepare for dives, the meticulous safety checks, the quiet moments of anticipation before plunging into the unknown. Watching these sequences, I found myself reflecting on the human need for routine and order, especially in environments where chaos lurks just beneath the surface. It is a grounding point for the story, one that allows the extraordinary events to resonate more deeply, because they erupt from a world that is credible and tangible. From the very first moments, we see that our protagonists carry with them histories, personal stakes, and relationships that will influence every choice they make. The film does not linger in exposition for long. Instead, it allows character dynamics to emerge organically through dialogue, gestures, and small interactions that reveal bonds of trust, subtle rivalries, and hints of unresolved tension. For instance, the camaraderie among the research team is evident in their playful banter, yet we also sense underlying anxiety, a quiet acknowledgement that their work is dangerous, that beneath the surface lies a world that is not meant to be fully understood. These human elements are crucial because they anchor the audience, giving us someone to care about when the narrative begins its descent into extraordinary danger. The first major thread of tension arises when the team detects something unusual in the depths, a disturbance in their instruments that signals the presence of a creature far larger and more intelligent than any previously encountered. There is a beauty in the film's careful escalation here. The fear is never instantaneous or cheap. It creeps in gradually, built through visual cues, the flicker of lights, the eerie silence of the ocean, and the way the characters' curiosity and dread intertwine. It reminds me of the way great literature often builds suspense, not through shock alone, but through anticipation, through the feeling that something is just beyond the veil of perception. As the plot deepens, we are drawn into the first sequence of real confrontation with the creatures of the trench. There is a tension between the human characters' desire to explore and understand, and the instinctual fear that tells them to retreat. This conflict is rendered in both physical and psychological terms. Characters hesitate, reconsider their actions, weigh their knowledge against their gut reactions. I found myself relating to these moments because they reflect a universal human experience. Our fascination with danger, our compulsion to approach the unknown even when it threatens us. The film captures this beautifully, illustrating the delicate balance between courage and hubris. We also see the story's first exploration of the wider implications of the creature's presence. The initial encounters are both thrilling and unsettling, as the team realizes that these beings are not only massive, but also highly adaptable, capable of intelligence and strategy that challenges their assumptions about what lives in the deep. These early sequences reminded me of classic science fiction and adventure literature, where humanity is confronted by forces that resist categorization or control. There is an implicit moral question here. Just because we can enter these spaces, just because we can study or hunt these creatures, does it mean we should? The narrative plants these seeds early, giving the story an ethical dimension that runs alongside the adrenaline of the action. Tensions among the human characters begin to intensify as well. Different personalities clash under stress, some driven by curiosity, some by fame or ambition, and others by a cautious pragmatism that seeks to preserve life over discovery. These interpersonal conflicts are not just filler. They shape every decision the team makes, and they often have consequences that echo through the unfolding events. For example, a disagreement about the proper approach to a dive leads to a sequence where mistakes, no matter how small, become magnified in the pressure cooker environment of the trench. I was struck by how the film uses these moments to remind us that human error, pride, and fear are as formidable as any sea monster. Amidst these tensions, the narrative intersperses moments of quiet reflection and awe. Scenes of the trench itself, its alien beauty, the bioluminescent creatures, the vertical drop into darkness, are portrayed with a painterly attention to visual detail. These moments function almost as meditation, giving both characters and audience a chance to contemplate the enormity of the environment and the vulnerability of humanity within it. I felt a deep resonance here because it mirrors the awe I've experienced in natural settings, standing before mountains or deep forests, sensing the scale of the world and our relative smallness. In a sense, the trench operates as a metaphorical landscape of human humility, a stage upon which the drama of courage, curiosity, and survival will unfold. The first major action sequence occurs when the team makes direct contact with one of the larger creatures. The tension is immediate and visceral. Alarms blare, the water churns, and characters are forced into split-second decisions. The scene is carefully choreographed to maintain suspense while highlighting the limitations of human technology and perception. I found it fascinating how the director balanced spectacle with plausibility. The fear feels earned because the audience understands the constraints the characters face. Every missed observation, every delayed reaction, every overconfidence in equipment carries weight, and this realism deepens engagement. Parallel to the physical dangers, the narrative begins to weave in subtle commentary on scientific ethics, the commercialization of discovery, and the media's role in shaping perception. One character, often positioned as the voice of caution, articulates concerns about exposing such a dangerous species to the world. Another character, more ambitious, argues for the glory and recognition of bringing the discovery to light. These debates, while framed within an adventure context, resonate with larger philosophical questions. When knowledge is power, what responsibilities come with it? And when curiosity endangers life, what lines should we refuse to cross? It reminded me of the ethical dilemmas explored in literature. From Mary Shelley's contemplation of creation and consequence in Frankenstein to the moral questioning in modern science fiction, showing that even blockbuster cinema can engage in meaningful philosophical inquiry. As we approach the midpoint of the narrative, the plot escalates with multiple converging threads. One is the logistical challenge of the deep-sea operations. Vehicles malfunction, communications fail, and environmental hazards intensify. The other is the strategic intelligence of the creatures themselves, which begins to reveal that these are not merely mindless predators, but entities capable of learning and anticipating human actions. The interweaving of these threads, the human struggle against natural limits and the unpredictable behavior of creatures, creates a narrative tension that is relentless without feeling exhausting. There is a rhythm here, a push and pull that keeps the viewer both engaged and reflective. During this period, we also witness moments of personal growth among the main characters. Fear and adversity catalyze transformation. The cautious become brave, the self-assured become humbled, and alliances are tested and strengthened. I found these developments particularly compelling because they are subtle. The film doesn't rely on dramatic monologues or obvious gestures of heroism. Instead, character change is revealed in glances, decisions under pressure, and moments of quiet observation. These touches make the narrative feel lived in, as though we are observing real people navigating extraordinary circumstances, rather than archetypes moving through predictable beats. A particularly striking scene occurs when the team discovers the full scale of the trench ecosystem. The visuals here are spectacular. Glowing creatures weaving through shadowed columns, massive predators moving with predatory grace, and the sheer verticality of the underwater canyon. The sequence is awe-inspiring not just for its aesthetic impact, but for the narrative weight it carries. The character's vulnerability is palpable, and the audience is reminded that the trench is not just a setting, but an antagonist in its own right. The film excels in this respect, turning environment into character, and I found myself thinking about literary settings. Wuthering Heights moors, Conrad's rivers, Melville's seas, that shape the narrative as much as the people within them. Meanwhile, human antagonism begins to assert itself in more concrete terms. Some crew members take risks motivated by ambition or fear, leading to incidents that put others in peril. These conflicts, layered over the external threat of the creatures, increase narrative tension and underscore the duality of danger. The world can be lethal, but so can the choices we make within it. This aspect of the story resonated strongly with me, reminding me of the moral complexity found in classical adventure tales and survival literature, where human error is as potent a force as natural hazards. As the narrative drives forward, the film introduces moments of revelation that foreshadow even greater challenges ahead. Small discoveries, traces of previously unseen species, evidence of the creature's intelligence, hints of unknown hazards, compound the sense of foreboding. These revelations function as narrative breadcrumbs, ensuring that curiosity and dread grow hand in hand. I found this particularly effective because it mirrors the way tension builds in literature. Knowledge, once glimpsed, is never fully digestible. It demands engagement and interpretation, keeping both characters and audience in a state of heightened anticipation. By the time the first significant confrontation reaches its apex, we are fully invested. Characters are tested physically, intellectually, and emotionally. They navigate the interplay of fear, strategy, and instinct, demonstrating the breadth of their capacities and flaws. The sequence is exhilarating, terrifying, and thought-provoking all at once, a perfect encapsulation of what makes storytelling in extreme settings so compelling. The collision of human ingenuity with the raw, unknowable forces of nature. Watching this, I couldn't help but reflect on the way challenges, literal or metaphorical, shape who we are, revealing courage and vulnerability in equal measure. The first half closes with a mixture of tension, revelation, and anticipation. The creatures are not fully understood, human relationships are tested, and the environment remains as mysterious and formidable as ever. There is a sense of both achievement and uncertainty. The characters have faced trials and survived, but the deeper, more profound challenges await. The narrative pauses here, not to rest, but to prepare the audience for a descent into even more complex layers of danger and moral inquiry. In reflecting on this portion of the story, I found it remarkable how the film balances spectacle with introspection. It could have been merely an action-adventure, yet it consistently returns to questions of morality, courage, curiosity, and the human tendency to confront what lies beyond comprehension. It reminded me that blockbuster narratives can contain literary depth, that the most thrilling sequences do not preclude philosophical reflection. There is a subtle intelligence in the storytelling, one that rewards both engagement with the plot and contemplation of its larger resonances. Even as we anticipate the next phase of the journey, the first half leaves us with enduring impressions. The vulnerability of humans in extreme environments, the ethical dimensions of exploration, the unpredictable intelligence of the creatures, and the power of the deep ocean as both setting and character. I found myself revisiting these sequences in my mind long after viewing, turning over moments of decision, fear, and revelation, much as one might reread a dense, complex chapter in a novel. It is this lingering effect, the persistence of thought and emotion, that makes the story truly compelling. Through these events and developments, the film establishes a rich narrative foundation. It presents not only thrilling action and stunning visuals, but also an intellectual and emotional texture that invites reflection. The early sequences are meticulously constructed to escalate tension while deepening character insight and thematic resonance. It is a storytelling approach that rewards careful attention, offering multiple layers to analyze and interpret. And for those of us who delight in thinking critically about narrative, it provides fertile ground for discussion, inviting questions about courage, hubris, and our own encounters with the unknown. As we prepare to follow the characters further into the trench, the stakes have been firmly established. The first half of the journey has immersed us in an alien world, introduced us to complex personalities, and revealed both external and internal threats. And while the characters have already faced extraordinary danger, the narrative has hinted that what lies ahead will challenge them, and us, in ways even more profound. There is anticipation, excitement, and a sense of impending revelation, and it is impossible not to be swept along with both awe and apprehension. In sum, the story thus far combines thrilling underwater adventure with rich character development, thematic complexity, and ethical inquiry. The narrative carefully balances tension, spectacle, and introspection, creating an immersive experience that engages both the senses and the mind. It leaves the audience poised on the edge of discovery, fully aware that the creatures of the trench are only part of the challenge, and that the true test lies in the interplay between human courage, folly, and ingenuity. The first portion of the story succeeds not only in entertaining, but in prompting reflection, establishing stakes and deepening investment in both characters and narrative. As the story surges forward from the initial tensions, the stakes deepen in ways that feel both inevitable and shocking. The ocean, already portrayed as an almost sentient antagonist, becomes an even more formidable presence, a vast and unknowable entity that reshapes the narrative around its unpredictability. The characters, who had already faced the initial shock of discovering the trench's colossal inhabitants, now encounter a series of challenges that test every skill, every ounce of courage, and every measure of intellect they possess. One of the first developments in this segment is the intensification of human conflict. Ambition, fear, and desperation begin to collide in ways that create friction as potent as the external threats they face. Decisions that once seemed minor now carry severe consequences. A seemingly innocuous choice, a route for a dive, a timing for a maneuver, or a reliance on technology becomes a pivot point for survival. It is remarkable how the narrative intertwines these moments of human error with the growing threat of the creatures, reinforcing a central truth. Survival in such an environment demands more than courage. It demands judgment, collaboration, and humility. The narrative accelerates with the introduction of new and more intelligent creatures. Whereas the first encounters hinted at adaptive behavior, these later confrontations reveal strategic thinking, almost preternatural anticipation of human actions. The tension is heightened not merely by size or speed but by cognition, the unsettling awareness that these beings are capable of planning, of exploiting weaknesses, of responding dynamically. Watching these sequences, I was struck by the sense of wonder and terror intertwined. The ocean feels like a chessboard, with human players constantly reacting to moves they cannot predict, and the consequences of miscalculation are stark and immediate. Amidst these rising dangers, the characters' internal journeys become central to the story's momentum. Personal fears, unresolved tensions, and past regrets emerge with force. One character, previously depicted as confident and unflappable, faces a sequence of events that strips away that veneer, revealing vulnerability and the raw fear of mortality. Another character, initially cautious to the point of paralysis, discovers resourcefulness and decisiveness under pressure. The beauty of this portion of the narrative is the subtlety with which transformation is portrayed. Rather than abrupt cinematic epiphanies, growth is shown in incremental choices, glances, and reactions, mirroring the complexity of real human experience. Tensions between team members escalate, particularly as the ethical and moral dimensions of their mission come to the forefront. The question of whether to exploit the creatures for scientific glory, for profit, or for personal recognition becomes a matter of life and death. These conflicts are not merely philosophical. They manifest as disagreements over strategy, priority, and risk management, and the consequences ripple through subsequent encounters. The story does a remarkable job of showing that human conflict is as lethal as the creatures themselves, creating a layered tension that keeps the audience invested in both the physical and psychological stakes. A turning point in the narrative occurs when the trench environment itself reveals its complexity. New areas of the abyss open before the characters, some teeming with strange bioluminescent life, others threatening with crushing depths and hidden crevices. The visuals here are breathtaking, rendered with a painterly attention to detail that immerses viewers in both awe and dread. As the characters descend further into these uncharted regions, the narrative emphasizes the duality of the ocean. It is a place of beauty and terror, of mystery and revelation, simultaneously inviting exploration and warning of the consequences of hubris. I found this resonated deeply with my own reflections on nature's vastness, reminding me that true knowledge often comes with a cost, and that wonder and fear are frequently intertwined. The story escalates toward its first major twist when a critical piece of technology, relied upon for navigation and survival, fails in the midst of a high-stakes encounter. This failure amplifies the danger exponentially, forcing characters to rely on intuition, adaptability, and teamwork rather than instruments and predetermined plans. The tension is almost unbearable because the audience understands the fragility of their situation. Each choice now carries far more weight, and mistakes can no longer be mitigated by advanced equipment. The sequence is as thrilling as it is intellectually engaging, emphasizing problem-solving under pressure, improvisation, and the human capacity to endure when structure falls away. At this stage, the narrative begins to explore the history and behavior of the creatures in greater depth. Through a combination of observation, deduction, and recovered data, the team uncovers astonishing insights. These beings have been adapting for millennia, their behaviors influenced by factors humans are only beginning to comprehend. The story conveys this in a way that is both scientific and awe-inspiring, invoking a sense of wonder akin to discovering the intricacies of an ancient ecosystem or piecing together a long-lost civilization. The creatures are no longer simply antagonists, they are part of a system, a complex and interconnected world that challenges human arrogance and assumptions. As the characters grapple with these revelations, their interactions grow more emotionally charged. Bonds are tested, alliances form and fracture, and personal histories emerge as factors influencing their decisions. A character motivated by guilt or past failure makes a selfless choice that alters the course of events. Another, driven by ambition, risks everything for a fleeting gain. These narrative choices underscore a fundamental truth of storytelling. Conflict is not solely external, and heroism is often a blend of courage, ethics, and adaptability. I found myself reflecting on how literature frequently explores these same dynamics, where internal struggles are inseparable from external challenges, and moral choices shape outcomes as profoundly as any physical confrontation. The narrative tension continues to mount with sequences of intense action, including narrow escapes, coordinated maneuvers against the creatures, and moments of near-catastrophic failure. The choreography of these events is meticulous, blending suspense with strategic problem-solving. Characters must calculate risk in real time, anticipate reactions, and reconcile personal fears with collective needs. These sequences are not mere spectacle. They are narrative vehicles that reveal character, test relationships, and underscore the stakes of the trench environment. Watching these moments, I felt a kinship with the characters' strategic thinking, appreciating how the story rewards attention to detail, foresight, and courage under pressure. A particularly poignant twist occurs when an unexpected ally emerges, either in the form of another human actor or an unforeseen behavior from one of the creatures, which challenges previous assumptions and forces a recalibration of strategy. This twist is not only exciting but thematically rich. It reinforces ideas of adaptability, the importance of observation, and the notion that survival in a complex system requires both humility and ingenuity. The story's ability to weave plot development with thematic resonance is one of its most compelling qualities, creating layers of meaning that linger long after the immediate tension resolves. As the climax approaches, the narrative orchestrates a convergence of multiple story threads. The human conflicts, the creature behavior, the environmental hazards, and the ethical dilemmas all intersect. The characters face a sequence of challenges that push them to their physical, emotional, and intellectual limits. There is a sense of inevitability here, a rhythm to the escalation that mirrors the structure of classical adventure narratives. The audience knows the resolution is coming, but the path is fraught with uncertainty, risk, and revelation. The stakes feel absolute, and the suspense is meticulously sustained. In one of the story's most memorable sequences, a character demonstrates ingenuity under extreme pressure, devising a solution that combines elements of strategy, knowledge of the environment, and understanding of the creature's behavior. This moment is both thrilling and intellectually satisfying, as it rewards the audience for following the narrative closely, appreciating the logical progression of challenges and solutions. It also underscores the theme of interdependence. Survival is not only a personal achievement, but a collaborative effort, reliant on trust, communication, and the ability to anticipate both human and non-human actors. The final confrontation is staged with cinematic grandeur and narrative precision. Characters maneuver through the trench with a combination of courage, cunning, and ethical awareness, facing the creatures in a battle that tests every lesson learned up to this point. The tension is relentless, and the stakes are vividly clear. Failure is not an option, and the consequences of miscalculation are catastrophic. Yet the narrative balances spectacle with introspection, ensuring that action does not overshadow character development, thematic depth, or the ethical questions that have been threaded throughout the story. Resolution begins to emerge as the immediate threats are neutralized or escaped. Characters reflect on their experiences, the choices they made, and the transformations they underwent. The trench, while still imposing, recedes as a direct threat, leaving in its wake questions of human ambition, curiosity, and the delicate balance between knowledge and responsibility. The story closes not with empty triumph, but with a nuanced acknowledgement that survival is contingent, understanding is partial, and wonder comes with responsibility. This reflective ending allows the narrative to resonate emotionally and intellectually, inviting the audience to consider both the characters' journeys and their own responses to risk, discovery, and moral complexity. What makes this portion of the story particularly effective is the interplay between narrative tension, character development, and thematic depth. Every plot twist, every sequence of danger, is matched by insight into human behavior, ethical inquiry, or philosophical reflection. The creatures of the trench are not mere monsters. They are catalysts for introspection, mirrors reflecting human ambition, fear, and ingenuity. The ocean itself remains a central presence, vast, mysterious, and morally neutral, reminding us that the true challenge lies not in conquest, but in understanding and respect. Several narrative motifs are reinforced as the story draws to a close. Courage is shown to be multifaceted, combining bravery, intelligence, and ethical judgment. Hubris is punished not through didacticism, but through natural consequence, illustrating a nuanced moral universe. Human relationships are strengthened through adversity, and personal growth is achieved not in isolation, but in the context of collaboration and interdependence. I found these motifs resonated deeply with the way literature often treats adventure and exploration. The journey is as much about inner discovery as it is about external conquest. In the denouement, the surviving characters process the experience in moments of quiet reflection. There is relief, certainly, but also a lingering awareness of the trench's enormity, the creature's intelligence, and the fragility of human existence. The film does not offer neat closure on every detail, leaving certain mysteries unresolved, which enhances its thematic weight. Life, like the ocean, is unpredictable, and understanding is always partial. This open-ended reflection gives the story a sense of realism and intellectual depth, elevating it beyond mere spectacle. As the narrative unfolds, it becomes increasingly apparent that the true heartbeat of the story lies not only in the vast, terrifying creatures or the crushing depths of the trench, but in the people who confront these challenges. Each character emerges as a living study in courage, intellect, and moral complexity, their personalities interwoven with both the action and the philosophical questions the story poses. Watching them, I often found myself reflecting not merely on who they are, but on the ways in which extreme circumstances illuminate the subtleties of human behavior. At the center stands Jonas, a figure who initially comes across as confident, methodical, and fearless, the kind of protagonist whose competence seems unshakable. Yet the brilliance of his characterization lies in its layers. He is not a superhero in the conventional sense. His bravery is not untested, and his decisions carry weighty consequences. As the story progresses, we see Jonas grappling with the ethical dimensions of exploration and risk, balancing the instinct to protect those he leads with the allure of discovery. His intelligence and experience are evident, but what resonates most is his vulnerability. Moments when hesitation, fear, or moral uncertainty crack through the veneer of certainty, revealing a profoundly human core. I found myself empathizing deeply with these moments, recognizing the tension between knowledge and instinct, authority and fallibility, a tension familiar to anyone who has faced responsibility under pressure. Alongside Jonas is Mei, a character whose resilience and ingenuity shine with an intensity that contrasts yet complements his leadership. Her brilliance is not merely technical. It is emotional, ethical, and adaptive. She reads situations and people with insight that often saves the team from disaster. Yet what makes her memorable is the way her competence is interlaced with doubt and curiosity. In the deep, shifting shadows of the trench, her intellect is tested not only against monstrous threats, but against the unpredictable contingencies of human ambition and the moral dilemmas that arise when lives are at stake. Her presence challenges the narrative to consider competence alongside compassion, decision-making alongside intuition, and courage alongside empathy. I found her struggle both inspiring and profoundly relatable, a reminder that intelligence without moral grounding can falter, and that true heroism often emerges through collaboration and discernment. Another compelling figure is Mac, whose presence initially brings a lighter, more grounded energy to the story. Mac embodies pragmatism and loyalty, often acting as the voice of caution amid the mounting risks of the expedition. Yet beneath his outward composure lies a wealth of personal history, anxieties, and subtle insecurities that the narrative reveals with care. He is, in many ways, the connective tissue of the group, the character who observes, mediates, and sometimes sacrifices personal desire for collective survival. Watching Mac navigate the pressures of the trench, I was struck by how the story honors the quieter forms of heroism. The steadying influence, the small but decisive interventions, and the moral clarity that emerges not from spectacle, but from consistent judgment under duress. The story also introduces characters who function as mirrors to human ambition and folly. These individuals, motivated by personal gain, scientific recognition, or recklessness, provide a foil to the more ethically centered protagonists. One such character, whose charm and confidence initially inspire trust, ultimately reveals the hazards of hubris. A refusal to acknowledge limits, a willingness to take unacceptable risks, and a moral flexibility that places others in jeopardy. Watching this arc unfold is both thrilling and sobering. It serves as a reminder that in literature and life alike, courage alone does not guarantee survival, and that ethical lapses often carry consequences far greater than immediate danger. I found myself reflecting on the ways in which personal ambition, if unchecked, can become as dangerous as the forces we seek to confront. In addition to these central figures, supporting characters populate the story with richness and texture. Each team member, no matter how brief their appearance, embodies a distinct approach to fear, problem-solving, and moral responsibility. Some respond with intellectual rigor, others with instinctive courage, and still others with emotional intelligence that guides the group in subtle but crucial ways. Observing the interplay of these personalities reminded me of ensemble literature, where character networks illuminate thematic resonance. No individual is isolated. Every action reverberates, and every choice influences the collective outcome. The trench becomes not just a physical arena, but a crucible in which human strengths, weaknesses, and contradictions are laid bare. A recurring element in the characterization is the tension between knowledge and humility. Many of the protagonists possess exceptional expertise, whether scientific, navigational, or tactical. Yet the story is careful to show that knowledge alone is insufficient when faced with a system as vast, unpredictable, and morally indifferent as the trench ecosystem. Characters who cling to certainty, who underestimate the intelligence of the creatures or the variability of the environment, encounter consequences that are both immediate and instructive. In contrast, those who combine expertise with adaptability, observation, and ethical sensitivity navigate challenges more successfully. This dynamic makes the character arcs deeply satisfying, as it reinforces the narrative's central exploration of human cognition, morality, and resilience. One of the most compelling narrative strategies is the way the story intertwines action with psychological development. High-stakes sequences are not mere spectacle. They serve as crucibles for character revelation. For instance, during moments of life-threatening danger, characters reveal traits previously only hinted at. Courage tempered by doubt, decisiveness born of empathy, and ingenuity emerging from improvisation. These sequences do more than thrill. They illuminate the narrative's core inquiry into what it means to be human when confronted with forces both external and internal that challenge identity, morality, and intellect. I often found myself contemplating how such storytelling mirrors classical literature, where extreme circumstances expose the latent capacities of character, ethical frameworks, and social dynamics. The relational dynamics among the characters further enrich their development. Trust, loyalty, and interpersonal tension all play critical roles in shaping outcomes. Alliances form and fracture under stress, revealing not only personal motives, but the ethical undercurrents of collaboration. For example, a choice to prioritize one life over another, or a decision to act independently rather than consult the group, reverberates through subsequent events, demonstrating how character is inseparable from action. Observing these relational patterns, I was reminded of the delicate interplay of moral philosophy and narrative structure. Character growth and thematic resonance are inseparable, and the story thrives because these relationships are given space to evolve naturally under pressure. Interestingly, the creatures of the trench also serve as a lens through which human character is explored. Their intelligence, adaptability, and unpredictability force characters to confront not only external threat, but internal limitations. Responses to these creatures reveal much about personality. Some react with instinctive fear, others with calculated strategy, and still others with ethical consideration that balances self-preservation with respect for life. These interactions underscore the narrative's exploration of empathy, intellect, and courage, demonstrating that character is as much defined by responses to the environment as by intrinsic traits. I found this element particularly fascinating, as it elevates the creatures from mere antagonists to catalysts for reflection, echoing the symbolic role of challenges in literature where the external often mirrors the internal. A notable aspect of characterization is the evolution of self-awareness. As the narrative progresses, even the most confident or ostensibly fearless characters encounter limits that force introspection. This process is neither abrupt nor superficial. It is carefully woven into both dialogue and action, allowing the audience to perceive growth as a continuum rather than a sudden revelation. The result is a portrayal of human resilience that feels credible, intellectually engaging, and emotionally resonant. Watching these arcs unfold, I often reflected on my own experiences of testing limits, making choices under pressure, and reconciling ambition with humility, a resonance that makes the characters feel lived in and profoundly human. The narrative also excels in exploring moral and ethical dimensions through its characters. Questions of responsibility, risk, and the consequences of action recur throughout, shaping both decision-making and interpersonal dynamics. Characters who confront these questions thoughtfully emerge not only as heroes in a conventional sense, but as morally and intellectually compelling figures. Those who evade or ignore these dilemmas encounter consequences that reinforce the narrative's philosophical depth. The story is not merely about survival, but about the quality and wisdom of choices made in extreme circumstances. This moral dimension transforms the plot into a richer, more reflective experience, one that encourages the audience to consider not only the narrative but their own ethical intuitions. It is also worth noting how the narrative uses character contrast to deepen thematic resonance. Brave yet fallible protagonists are juxtaposed against reckless, arrogant, or short-sighted counterparts, creating a spectrum of human response to danger, uncertainty, and ethical complexity. These contrasts illuminate not only individual traits but broader truths about human cognition, social responsibility, and the moral imperatives that guide behavior under duress. Observing these contrasts, I found myself appreciating the story as a meditation on human diversity. In extreme circumstances, strengths and weaknesses are magnified, and moral clarity is tested against instinct, fear, and ambition. Furthermore, the characters' emotional arcs are carefully interlaced with the plot. Moments of grief, fear, triumph, and relief are not isolated. They ripple through decision-making, influence strategy, and shape interpersonal relationships. For example, a loss early in the story continues to affect choices, trust dynamics, and risk tolerance, demonstrating how emotional experiences inform ethical and practical judgment. This nuanced interplay of emotion and action elevates the narrative, transforming what could have been a straightforward adventure tale into a profound exploration of human psychology, morality, and resilience. The story's attention to detail in character behavior, dialogue, and decision-making underscores its literary sophistication. Actions are rarely arbitrary. Each choice illuminates personality, ethical orientation, or intellectual capacity. Subtle gestures, expressions, and hesitations carry weight, revealing internal deliberation and growth. I found this aspect particularly compelling, as it mirrors the techniques of classic character-driven literature, where the minutiae of human behavior convey thematic depth and narrative tension. Even secondary and tertiary characters, though not always central to the immediate plot, are treated with sufficient depth to feel real and consequential. Their presence reinforces the stakes, illuminates aspects of the protagonist's personalities, and adds richness to the story's moral and intellectual landscape. Every character, no matter how brief their screen time, participates in the narrative's exploration of courage, ingenuity, and ethical responsibility, ensuring that the story's thematic resonance is distributed throughout its ensemble rather than concentrated solely in the lead roles. By the conclusion of the narrative, the characters emerge transformed by their experiences. Growth is evident not only in skill and courage, but in moral and intellectual sophistication. Relationships are deepened, self-awareness is expanded, and the ethical complexity of their world is internalized. The journey through the trench has tested every dimension of human capacity: physical, cognitive, emotional, and ethical. In reflecting on their development, I was struck by how the story balances action and reflection, adventure and philosophy, spectacle and introspection. The characters' arcs feel complete yet open-ended, suggesting a world in which survival, learning, and moral growth are ongoing processes rather than finite achievements. Ultimately, the character analysis of Meg 2. The Trench reveals a narrative deeply invested in the exploration of human nature under extreme conditions. The story celebrates courage, ingenuity, and resilience while probing the limits of knowledge, ethical responsibility, and emotional intelligence. Each character contributes uniquely to this exploration, and their interplay creates a rich tapestry of human experience that elevates the narrative beyond simple entertainment. By weaving together personal growth, moral complexity, and psychological realism, the story transforms its thrilling premise into a profound meditation on what it means to be human in the face of extraordinary challenges. Jonas, Mei-Ying, Mac, and the ensemble cast collectively embody a spectrum of human response, revealing both the heroic and fallible dimensions of character. Their interactions, ethical deliberations, and emotional struggles illuminate themes of trust, courage, knowledge, and moral responsibility, while their confrontations with external threats serve as catalysts for introspection and growth. The trench, while physically imposing, ultimately functions as a crucible for character, revealing latent capacities, testing moral resolve, and highlighting the interplay between intellect, empathy, and courage. Observing their journey, one recognizes that the story's true depth lies not in the creatures they face, but in the human dimensions they reveal. An exploration of identity, morality, and resilience that resonates far beyond the immediate spectacle of action. In reflecting on the narrative, it is evident that character is not merely a vehicle for plot, but a lens through which the story's thematic concerns are realized. Each choice, interaction, and revelation contributes to a broader meditation on human potential, ethical responsibility, and the intricate balance between knowledge, courage, and humility. The story invites audiences to engage not only with its thrilling events, but with the psychological and moral dimensions of its characters, creating a layered experience that rewards both emotional engagement and intellectual reflection. By the end, the characters stand as more than figures in an adventure. They are studies in resilience, ethics, and human complexity. The story encourages audiences to consider how they might respond under similar pressures, what limits they would encounter, and which values would guide their choices. In this way, the character analysis of Meg 2. The trench extends beyond the screen or page, prompting reflection on courage, morality, and the enduring quest for knowledge and self-understanding. The making of a film, especially one that plunges so boldly into the deepest, most enigmatic parts of the ocean, is rarely a straightforward journey. From the very conception of the story to the final touches of post-production, Meg 2. The trench was a tapestry woven from a mixture of meticulous planning, audacious risk-taking, and occasional, almost surreal serendipity. What strikes me as someone who is endlessly curious about the intersection of art, science, and sheer human ambition is how much of the movie's creation unfolded in ways that were as unpredictable and extraordinary as the deep-sea environments it depicts. One of the earliest and most fascinating stories concerns the research that underpinned the depiction of the trench itself. The production team consulted with marine biologists, oceanographers, and deep-sea explorers not just to capture realism, but to understand the psychological and physiological consequences of descending into extreme oceanic depths. These consultations revealed not only the dangers of pressure and temperature, but also the eerie bioluminescent behaviors of real-life deep-sea creatures. The filmmakers were so inspired that they adapted certain creature designs to reflect natural phenomena that, while appearing fantastical on screen, were rooted in real biology. What struck me as particularly remarkable was that some of these bioluminescent sequences were modeled after actual photos and footage of deep-sea organisms, giving moments in the film a startling authenticity that belied the purely fictional nature of the narrative. Watching those scenes, I often found myself marveling at the blending of science and imagination, thinking about how human creativity can amplify the wonder already present in nature. During pre-production, another unusual occurrence emerged around the design of the trench itself. The set designers and visual effects team collaborated for months, constructing massive digital and physical models that mimicked the topography, claustrophobia, and looming darkness of an unexplored abyss. Yet one of the strangest challenges came from the fact that water behaves unpredictably in confined or digitally simulated spaces. Early tests with scaled water tanks produced odd, almost uncanny effects. Tiny bubbles that refracted light in unexpected ways, waves that seemed almost to have their own rhythm, and subtle reflections that interfered with the illusion of depth. To overcome this, the VFX team had to study fluid dynamics to a degree most movie productions never require. I remember reading about their painstaking trial and error process, and thinking about how something as ordinary as water could become a character in itself, a mysterious, capricious participant in the storytelling. The actors themselves often faced experiences that blurred the line between performance and reality. For sequences shot in giant water tanks, they spent hours submerged, interacting with animatronic creatures and digital placeholders that would later be enhanced in post-production. These sessions weren't merely about acting in front of a camera. They were physically taxing, emotionally immersive, and psychologically demanding. In one account, a lead actor recounted a moment when the mechanical appendages of an animatronic shark malfunctioned mid-shot, creating an almost horrifyingly real threat in the tank. The crew's reaction was a blend of panic, awe, and quick problem-solving, and the footage captured was reportedly so authentic that it inspired slight adjustments in the performance for that scene. The intersection of human vulnerability and mechanical unpredictability, in a way, mirrors the film's thematic exploration of survival in the face of overwhelming natural forces. Perhaps one of the strangest behind-the-scenes elements involved the creation of the trench's lighting. The filmmakers wanted the environment to feel oppressive, alien, and almost tactile in its darkness, yet they also needed visibility for the actors and cameras. Achieving this balance required an unconventional approach. LED rigs were interspersed with gels of varying colors, often creating unpredictable reflections off water surfaces and digital screens. According to interviews with the cinematographer, they discovered that small adjustments in the angle of a single light could transform the emotional tone of an entire scene. This meant that scenes sometimes required hours of tweaking, with actors and crew holding positions in deep water or on platforms while technicians made minute adjustments. I found this fascinating because it's a reminder of how much artistry goes into creating an illusion that feels effortless on screen. In a sense, every flicker, shadow, and glow is a testament to human ingenuity responding to the physics of the deep. Even the creatures themselves have stories that border on the bizarre. The design process for the film's monstrous sharks was a blend of traditional sculpture, 3D modeling, and motion capture. Early concepts for the megalodons were so extreme that the production team had to recalibrate them for believability and cinematic practicality. At one stage, one of the animators shared that a digital test model reacted in ways that seemed almost alive, with subtle twitching of fins or tail movements that no human had explicitly animated. These moments prompted the team to refine their procedural animation techniques, embracing a degree of randomness to mimic natural behavior. Watching this process, I thought about how the boundary between digital creation and life itself can sometimes feel astonishingly thin, especially when guided by the observational rigor of scientists and artists alike. Another layer of unusual occurrences involved the coordination of the film's stunts and underwater choreography. Some sequences were filmed with actors wearing full-body harnesses while suspended in water tanks, requiring complex timing to synchronize with digital elements and animatronics. During one particularly ambitious shot, the timing of a mechanical creature and a suspended actor had to align with the motion of both water and camera movements. A small error in synchronization could have ruined the take entirely, or worse, created a safety risk. Crew members recounted moments of breath-holding tension, where everyone, from riggers to VFX supervisors, had to act with near-perfect coordination. These accounts made me reflect on how collaborative filmmaking often mirrors the high-stakes environments depicted in the story itself. Success demands acute observation, trust, and adaptability under pressure. One of the most delightful bits of trivia concerns the practical effects used for the smaller deep-sea creatures. To achieve an authentic, eerie appearance, the production designers experimented with materials as unconventional as phosphorescent gels, silicone molds, and even elements borrowed from scientific laboratory equipment. In several cases, the visual quirks that made it to the screen were accidental. A gel that glimmered oddly in tank water, or a reflection that created an unexpected silhouette, was embraced because it enhanced the otherworldly feel of the trench. This willingness to incorporate happy accidents into the artistic process, rather than attempting to control every variable, is a testament to the filmmaker's openness to discovery. A theme that resonates deeply with the story's central narrative about exploration, risk, and the unknown. Sound design, too, carries its own share of unusual anecdotes. To capture the sense of pressure, isolation, and alien threat, the team combined field recordings from actual deep-sea environments with electronically manipulated audio, often layering dozens of distinct elements. Some of these sounds were startlingly unconventional. Recordings of ship hull vibrations, echoes from deep tunnels, and even the subtle resonance of large water tanks themselves. Mixing these disparate sources produced a hauntingly immersive soundscape that transformed what could have been generic underwater ambience into a character in its own right. I found this deeply compelling because it highlights how even the invisible elements of filmmaking, sounds that the audience may subconsciously feel rather than notice, carry narrative weight and emotional resonance. The editing process revealed its own set of strange discoveries. Early cuts of certain sequences were, by the editor's own accounts, overwhelming in intensity, with too many visual and auditory stimuli competing for attention. Test screenings suggested that viewers were occasionally distracted rather than absorbed. To address this, the team experimented with unusual pacing adjustments, selective muting of layers, and even subtle color grading tweaks that emphasized mood rather than explicit detail. One might not notice these interventions consciously while watching the film, but their effect is profound. The audience experiences tension, claustrophobia, and awe almost instinctively, guided by choices invisible to the casual observer. I've always been fascinated by this, as it demonstrates how storytelling extends beyond plot and dialogue into the realm of perception itself. A particularly intriguing story involves a moment where a live feeding sequence was initially considered for one of the animatronic sharks. While this was ultimately deemed too risky and impractical, the idea prompted an extensive series of motion studies with mechanical models. The resulting data informed subtle adjustments in creature animation throughout the film, lending movements an eerie realism that audiences may not consciously register. It's remarkable to consider that a scene never filmed contributed so significantly to the final product, demonstrating the iterative, almost scientific nature of filmmaking. Even wardrobe and costume design contributed to unusual, memorable details. Specially designed suits and harnesses for underwater scenes had to accommodate not only mobility but buoyancy, camera angles, and safety systems. In certain cases, actors reported that the suits themselves seemed to influence performance, subtly shaping posture, movement, and even psychological response to the environment. I found this profoundly interesting because it illustrates a rarely discussed truth. The physical constraints of production design often shape character portrayal in ways both literal and subconscious. In essence, the filmmaking environment becomes a collaborator in performance, an idea that resonates beautifully with the narrative's exploration of human interaction with extreme environments. The production also encountered weather-related surprises, despite extensive planning. Some outdoor sequences required delicate coordination with ocean tides, wind patterns, and light conditions, creating logistical puzzles that were part challenge, part serendipity. Crew members recounted instances when natural phenomena aligned almost perfectly with storyboarding, producing shots of breathtaking beauty and tension. At other times, sudden storms necessitated rapid improvisation, which the director and cinematographer embraced as opportunities for creative experimentation. These moments reflect a recurring theme. Storytelling, much like exploration itself, often thrives at the intersection of preparation and unpredictability. Perhaps one of the most fascinating aspects of the production was the collaboration between practical effects and cutting-edge digital technology. The team frequently conducted simultaneous physical and digital tests to determine how animatronics would interact with CGI elements in post-production. In one instance, a mechanical shark's fin created unexpected ripples in tank water, which the VFX team then incorporated digitally to enhance realism. Moments like these illustrate the symbiosis between tactile and virtual filmmaking, showing how what might initially appear as a flaw can become an integral part of the cinematic illusion. Even the marketing and promotional strategies surrounding the film involved unusual choices. For example, teaser campaigns incorporated deep-sea soundscapes and interactive social media elements designed to simulate immersion in the trench. While these might seem like minor embellishments, they exemplify the broader creative vision to blur the line between audience experience and narrative world, fostering curiosity, wonder, and engagement beyond the theater itself. In reflecting on all these strange, fascinating, and little-known details, one begins to appreciate the sheer ambition of a production that navigates physical, psychological, and technological frontiers simultaneously. Every decision, from the design of the trench to the motion of a shark's tail, reflects a meticulous attention to detail paired with openness to serendipity. The making of the film emerges almost as an adventure story in itself, a tale of discovery, improvisation, and collaboration that mirrors the narrative it presents on screen. Ultimately, what resonates most with me about these production stories is their humanity. Behind the monsters, deep-sea pressures, and high-stakes stunts, there is a team of creators grappling with challenges both extraordinary and mundane, negotiating the line between imagination and practicality, artistry and physics. Each strange occurrence, every little-known fact, underscores a truth about storytelling. The process is rarely linear, predictable, or entirely controllable. And yet, out of these complexities emerges a cohesive, thrilling, and surprisingly poignant cinematic experience. By the time the film reaches its conclusion, it is easy to forget just how much unseen labor, ingenuity, and bizarre happenstance contributed to the seamless experience on screen. The trench, the creatures, the tension, and the emotional arcs are all products of countless tiny miracles. Accidents embraced, challenges overcome, and insights gleaned from a willingness to explore the unknown. It is this layered, almost alchemical process that makes the behind-the-scenes stories so compelling. They remind us that cinema, at its most extraordinary, is a collaborative act of imagination, science, and sheer human audacity. Even months after watching the film, I find myself returning in thought to these production anecdotes. The misbehaving animatronics, the phosphorescent gels, the water tank experiments, and I marvel at the commitment and creativity involved. In reflecting on these behind-the-scenes oddities, one gains not only appreciation for technical skill, but also for the human curiosity and resilience that drives art into uncharted territory. Each of these strange facts becomes a small portal into the larger story of artistic endeavor, one that is every bit as rich, mysterious, and awe-inspiring as the story told on screen. The stories of misaligned lights that became narrative symbols, of mechanical sharks twitching with uncanny realism, of water behaving unpredictably, and of actors submerged in vast tanks all coalesce into a larger meditation on the intersection of imagination, craft, and nature. They reveal the film not simply as entertainment, but as a testament to what happens when human beings confront uncertainty with creativity and courage. These are the tales that linger long after the credits roll, the kind of trivia that transforms casual curiosity into genuine wonder, reminding us why we watch, why we study, and why we celebrate the strange, unseen, and miraculous processes behind every cinematic achievement. By the end, the strangest facts are not merely curiosities. They are touchstones for understanding the complexity, beauty, and audacity inherent in bringing a story from concept to screen. The making of this movie, in all its oddities and triumphs, becomes almost as gripping as the narrative itself. It is a story of people, ideas, and ingenuity navigating the unknown, echoing the very themes that drive the plot, the suspense, and the wonder that audiences experience. To me, this is the ultimate lesson of production. That behind every screen moment lies a tapestry of strange, fascinating, and profoundly human efforts, waiting to be discovered, appreciated, and marveled at. There's a particular thrill in watching a movie unfold, not merely as a consumer of spectacle, but as someone seeking to uncover layers of meaning beneath the surface. When I first watched the story set in the immense and mysterious trench, I was struck by how much it mirrored not just the mechanics of storytelling, but the complex rhythms of human fear, curiosity, and resilience. The events themselves, the moments of confrontation with the unknown, the sudden shifts in tension, the subtle interplay of character dynamics, felt less like conventional action beats and more like threads in a larger tapestry of thematic resonance. One of the earliest events that captured my attention was the initial descent into the trench. On the surface, it's a straightforward sequence of suspense and danger. Characters maneuvering through claustrophobic spaces, grappling with mechanical failures, and contending with the sheer immensity of the oceanic environment. But looking through a critical lens, this moment is as much about psychology as it is about survival. The filmmakers masterfully depict the human response to extreme uncertainty, how anticipation amplifies tension, how the mind fills gaps with imagined threats, and how instinct and intellect collide under pressure. Watching these sequences, I couldn't help but reflect on my own experiences with uncertainty, where the unknown seems both terrifying and magnetic. There's a universality to this depiction. Whether in the oceanic abyss or in the trenches of everyday life, we confront forces far larger than ourselves, and our reactions, fear, ingenuity, hesitation, define the narrative arc. The first major turning point that resonated critically is the encounter with one of the trench's massive predators. On one level, it's a spectacular action sequence, thrashing water, chaotic movement, the visceral thrill of danger. But beneath the surface, it raises important questions about perspective and power. The creature, enormous and alien, represents forces of nature that exist beyond human comprehension, forces that defy control or ownership. The film's treatment of this moment is fascinating. Rather than portraying the predator purely as a monster, it becomes a mirror for human vulnerability, hubris, and our tendency to underestimate environments we cannot fully grasp. From a thematic standpoint, this resonates with ecological and existential readings of the narrative. Here, the story subtly reminds us that human dominance is always provisional, that awe and humility coexist at the boundaries of our understanding. Watching this unfold, I felt a profound engagement with the narrative, the thrill of action intertwined with the discomfort of existential reflection. One of the sequences I found especially compelling involved the collaborative problem-solving under extreme conditions. Characters were forced to navigate not only the physical dangers of the trench, but also the interpersonal complexities of trust, communication, and leadership. The tension derived not solely from external threats, but from the subtle fracturing of relationships under pressure. Critically, this elevates the story beyond a mere spectacle of survival. It becomes a meditation on the human condition. I reflected on moments in my own life when collaboration under stress revealed unexpected strengths or weaknesses, and I realized how the narrative leverages these microdynamics to deepen emotional engagement. It's a reminder that even in the most extreme circumstances, human interaction shapes the trajectory of events as much as physical forces do. Another key event that demands attention is the escalation of peril through environmental manipulation, the trench itself acting almost as a sentient force. The filmmakers craft sequences in which shifts in pressure, currents, and lighting create obstacles as formidable as any creature. Critically, these moments emphasize that the story's antagonists are not limited to the visible, tangible threats. The environment is a character in its own right, demanding respect, strategy, and adaptability. This layering of conflict is particularly effective because it mirrors real-life experiences with uncertainty. Challenges are rarely singular or isolated. Observing this interplay, I was reminded of literary traditions in which setting reflects psychological states, from Gothic novels to naturalist texts, where environment and character psychology are intertwined. In the film, the trench is both literal and metaphorical, a space where fear, courage, and insight converge. The film's handling of narrative suspense is worth analyzing closely. In several pivotal scenes, the director employs a rhythm that oscillates between calm, almost meditative sequences and sudden bursts of chaos. This pacing is not arbitrary. It mirrors cognitive and emotional cycles, pulling the audience into a heightened state of engagement. For example, moments of silence, subtle water movements, and ambient sound cues precede intense encounters, allowing tension to accumulate organically. This critical observation is crucial. The film does not rely solely on visual spectacle to convey suspense. Instead, it orchestrates a symphony of sensory and psychological cues that manipulate anticipation and release, much like a carefully composed piece of literature manipulates narrative tempo to evoke emotion. Witnessing this, I appreciated how the film rewards attentive observation and reflective engagement, aligning well with viewers who enjoy intellectual and thematic depth alongside action. The introduction of secondary characters adds yet another layer for critical reflection. While some might dismiss them as narrative foils or comic relief, a closer examination reveals how they function as conduits for audience empathy and ethical contemplation. Each character's response to danger, ranging from fear-driven hesitation to bold decisiveness, illuminates moral and philosophical questions about choice, responsibility, and sacrifice. One particular subplot involving a character making a morally ambiguous decision in the heat of crisis stood out for me. At first glance, it might appear as simple tension building, but it serves a deeper purpose, challenging viewers to consider how context shapes ethical decision-making, how survival instincts can conflict with principles, and how courage is often entwined with uncertainty. Reflecting on this, I found myself thinking about broader human dilemmas, the ways ordinary people navigate moral gray areas, and how fiction provides a safe space to explore such complexities. Major plot twists further deepen the film's critical resonance. One twist involved the revelation of a previously unseen aspect of the trench's ecosystem, a narrative maneuver that shifts audience understanding of stakes and strategy. Critically, this moment does more than surprise. It reframes the narrative context, encouraging reassessment of prior events, choices, and assumptions. In literary terms, it functions as a structural pivot, reshaping the lens through which the story is read. I found myself reevaluating earlier scenes, noticing foreshadowing and subtle thematic cues I had initially overlooked. This is a powerful storytelling technique, aligning the film with classic narrative strategies where revelation transforms understanding, elevating suspense into reflection. Emotional resonance emerges prominently in sequences where human fragility is juxtaposed with the enormity of the trench and its inhabitants. Scenes of vulnerability, characters confronting mortality, facing isolation, or grappling with failure, gain amplified impact when contrasted with the immense scale of the environment. Critically, these moments function as emotional anchors, grounding the high-stakes action in relatable human experience. I remember being particularly struck by a scene in which a character's personal loss intersects with external danger, creating a layered moment of grief, tension, and resilience. Such sequences remind us that thrill and horror are more compelling when intertwined with genuine emotion, and that empathy is as central to engagement as spectacle. The climax offers a rich terrain for critical analysis. Here, narrative tension, thematic exploration, and emotional stakes converge in a tightly orchestrated sequence. The filmmakers employ a combination of spatial awareness, pacing, and dramatic irony to heighten suspense. Viewers are aware of potential outcomes before characters are, creating a tension between knowledge and anticipation. Critically, this alignment of audience and narrative perception mirrors techniques found in classic thrillers and suspense literature, where dramatic irony amplifies engagement and encourages reflection on character psychology. I found this particularly effective because it allows intellectual and emotional participation simultaneously. We are not merely passive observers, but active interpreters of unfolding events. Subtle motifs recur throughout the story, providing additional layers for analysis. Repetition of certain visual cues, such as dimly glowing bioluminescent light, the rhythmic pulse of water currents, or recurring mechanical failures, serves both aesthetic and thematic purposes. They remind viewers of the persistent, inescapable challenges posed by the trench, while also symbolizing the cyclical nature of fear, resilience, and discovery. Critically, this technique reflects a literary sensibility, using symbolism and motif to reinforce central ideas without explicit exposition. I was particularly drawn to how these recurring elements created an almost subconscious cohesion, binding disparate events into a larger, interconnected narrative fabric. The film also engages with broader existential themes through character-environment interactions. Encounters with the trench's predators provoke reflections on human limits, mortality, and our relationship with the natural world. Critically, these events invite viewers to contemplate the tension between curiosity and caution, ambition and humility. Scenes that might initially seem like conventional action beats acquire additional meaning. They are opportunities to reflect on the human condition, the ethical responsibilities of knowledge and exploration, and the psychological consequences of confronting the unknown. Watching these sequences, I felt a personal resonance, moments of awe, fear, and moral questioning that echo experiences beyond the cinematic frame. One of the most intriguing aspects of the narrative structure is its layered revelation of information. The audience is rarely given complete knowledge at once. Instead, crucial details emerge gradually, reshaping understanding and expectations. This storytelling approach encourages active engagement, demanding that viewers track multiple threads simultaneously and anticipate outcomes based on partial information. From a critical standpoint, this mirrors techniques in both suspense and literary fiction, where delayed revelation creates tension and encourages interpretive involvement. I found myself repeatedly revisiting prior assumptions during the film, which made the experience intellectually stimulating as well as emotionally engaging. The resolution of key plot events is another area rich with critical significance. Rather than providing neat closure for all elements, the film allows ambiguity to linger, reflecting the complexity of survival, knowledge, and risk in extreme environments. The choices characters make, the consequences they face, and the limits of their understanding collectively reinforce central thematic ideas. Human curiosity drives exploration, but it exists in a delicate balance with caution. Knowledge is never absolute, and courage is often defined by adaptation rather than triumph alone. This nuanced treatment distinguishes the film from more formulaic action narratives, rewarding viewers who seek reflection alongside entertainment. Throughout, the integration of scientific speculation and imaginative extrapolation provides both credibility and wonder. The trench, its ecosystem, and the creatures inhabiting it are presented with attention to plausible ecological dynamics, yet they retain a fantastical, awe-inspiring quality. Critically, this blend of realism and imagination enhances the film's impact. It roots tension in believable stakes while allowing the narrative to explore extremes of fear, curiosity, and resilience. I was particularly struck by how this balance mirrored human engagement with the unknown more broadly. We are drawn to facts and evidence, but equally captivated by mystery, possibility, and imaginative projection. Cinematic techniques, camera movement, lighting, sound design also contribute substantially to thematic resonance. Tight, confined framing heightens claustrophobia. Sweeping wide shots emphasize scale and vulnerability. Ambient soundscapes simulate immersion and unpredictability. These choices are not merely stylistic, but deeply aligned with the narrative's exploration of human psychology and environmental interaction. Experiencing these moments, I felt physically and emotionally transported, aware that the impact of story depends as much on how it is told as on what is told. It's a reminder of the profound interplay between form and content, a lesson in storytelling that transcends genre and medium. Thematically, the film is rich with meditations on courage, humility, and the intersection of human and natural worlds. Individual events, crisis moments, unexpected revelations, moral dilemmas serve as microcosms of these larger ideas. Critically, the coherence of these themes across disparate events demonstrates sophisticated narrative architecture. I found this deeply satisfying because it allowed engagement on multiple levels. Visceral excitement, intellectual reflection, and emotional resonance all coexisted in harmony. The result is a cinematic experience that lingers beyond immediate thrills, inviting ongoing contemplation of human limits, ambition, and ethical responsibility. In reflecting on the audience reception and impact, it becomes clear how these critical elements contribute to the film's resonance. Moments of suspense, ethical tension, and environmental wonder collectively generate engagement that is both immediate and reflective. Viewers are invited to consider not only what happens but why it happens, how characters respond, and what these responses reveal about human nature. This dual engagement, sensory and contemplative, enhances the film's appeal, particularly for audiences attuned to narrative depth, thematic subtlety, and intellectual stimulation. Personally, I found that the interplay of action and reflection allowed me to inhabit the story fully, oscillating between excitement and thoughtful consideration, much like one might in reading a compelling, multilayered novel. Ultimately, the significance of these events extends beyond individual thrills or plot mechanics. They collectively construct a narrative ecosystem in which action, character, environment, and theme are interdependent. Each crisis, revelation, and resolution carries weight because it resonates emotionally, intellectually, and thematically. Watching the film, I was continually reminded of why cinema can function as a mirror to human experience. It encapsulates fear, curiosity, courage, and ethical reflection within an immersive sensory medium. The events are thrilling, yes, but their critical power lies in their capacity to provoke thought, reflection, and emotional resonance long after the final scene. Even after multiple viewings, I continue to uncover nuances and connections that enhance my understanding of the narrative. Moments that once seemed purely thrilling reveal layers of ethical and philosophical significance. Sequences that initially seemed chaotic now resonate with deliberate thematic coherence. In this way, the film rewards attention, reflection, and intellectual curiosity. It reminds me why I love analyzing stories deeply. The act of watching becomes inseparable from the act of thinking, feeling, and engaging with ideas that extend beyond the screen. By the conclusion, one can appreciate how each significant event, each narrative choice, and each thematic thread coalesces into a work that is both entertaining and profoundly reflective. The film demonstrates the potential of popular cinema to operate on multiple levels, engaging body, mind, and spirit simultaneously. From the initial descent into the trench to the climactic confrontations and nuanced resolutions, the story is a carefully calibrated interplay of suspense, ethics, emotion, and thematic exploration. Experiencing it in this way, attentive, reflective, and fully immersed, I felt not only the thrill of the narrative but the intellectual and emotional depth that elevates it beyond mere spectacle. In reflecting on this film through critical perspectives, I find that it exemplifies what cinema can achieve when it balances entertainment with thematic exploration, action with reflection, and spectacle with introspection. The events themselves are meticulously crafted to convey not only plot but meaning, to invite not only excitement but contemplation, to resonate not only in the moment but in the lingering memory of the audience. This is why revisiting the story, thinking through its choices, and engaging with its thematic undercurrents feels endlessly rewarding. Ultimately, the film's significant events, when examined critically, reveal a narrative architecture that is both intricate and humane. They illuminate the characters' courage, the ethical dilemmas they face, the existential questions they confront, and the awe-inspiring environment in which all this unfolds. Each beat contributes to a cumulative effect, a story that captivates, challenges, and resonates. Experiencing it, I found myself reflecting on my own responses to uncertainty, fear, and ethical complexity, reminded of the ways that fiction, when crafted with care, functions as a mirror, a meditation, and a masterclass in narrative intelligence. In conclusion, the interplay of significant events, thematic resonance, and emotional engagement demonstrates how the film operates on multiple levels simultaneously. It is thrilling and reflective, immediate and lingering, visceral and intellectual. By considering these moments critically, one gains insight not only into the mechanics of storytelling, but into the human impulses that narrative explores: curiosity, courage, empathy, and reflection. Watching and analyzing it felt like an extended conversation about life, choice, and consequence, a reminder that the most compelling stories do more than entertain. They invite us to think, feel, and engage with the world and ourselves in new ways.